Alright everyone, hope you're good wherever you are. Now the other day I put on a poll on my Patreon page asking people what video I'd like to see next. I gave a few options, but the one that won was to go through my spares parts box, pick out some interesting, unique items, and kind of tell you guys a bit about them. Now I've brought up this box for a bit of dramatic effect, but I have selected a few items which I find interesting and I hope you do too. So let's just dive straight into this and see what we've got in the box. In nearly every case when I buy or build a new part, it's because I see a problem that I want to eliminate. This stem I bought to try on my Hex is no exception. It's made by a company called Red Cycling Products and seems to be an own brand of a shop or bike company. It's meant for trekking bikes and comes in 90mm by 35°, which is the same as I normally run. The problem I was trying to fix with this stem was hit my knees on the steer bolts. It doesn't happen often, but by moving the bolts to the front, it would make it impossible to. This stem design also integrates the stem spacers, which I thought was pretty neat. Unfortunately, this stem created more problems than it fixed. Firstly, I couldn't use the integrated screw-on top cap to make fitting the front cable through the steerer tube easier. I had an old headlock which allows a cable through with non-threaded forks, but the stem would need drilling to let the hose pass through. I also had to modify the bottom of the headlock by grinding it to try and make it fit the forks better, but it was still not great. Inspired do their own headlock, which would have worked way better. The other issue was it made my bars too high. The integrated spacer concept was more than I expected and it made my bike feel like a Dutch commuter. I tried to fix this, and note that's fixed with quote marks, by cutting off the bottom steerer clamp bolt to make it sit lower. Now I can't say I did the neatest job, but I would have tidied it up if I was going to use it. Unfortunately, the next issue was the final nail in the coffin. The stem only allowed a tiny amount of steerer insertion, like less than 2 centimeters. You can see here how it has a dead stop built in for the top cap bolt to pull against. It would have been possible to get the stem to work, but in trying to fix one problem that's not really a problem anyway, I created a whole host of new ones. My knees would have been safe, but I don't fancy trusting 1.5 centimeters of steerer clamped with just a single bolt. Despite spending money on the stem, it was time to let the idea die. For now anyway. Now this is the oldest part that I own, a Shimano XTR brake booster from the mid to late 90s. I bought it used about 12 years ago and it's seen better days. I've used this as a V-brake booster as intended, but I also badly drilled extra holes to use it with 4-bolt Magura mounts. I'm not sure what tyre I was using, but at some point I had to add a bit more tyre clearance. I think if I was going to use this again, I'd probably run it backwards. It looks a little bit nicer. Now these are still considered one of the best boosters ever made. The carbon and I-beam shape made it light and stiff. Fortunately, my cutouts don't seem to have affected it too much. For those who don't use or have never used rim brakes and I'm not sure what a brake booster is, it's basically a way to stiffen up a frame at the brake mounts. By attaching the booster, it stops the brake from flexing the frame outwards when the pads hit the rim, which increases brake force and can make the frame last longer. These boosters are getting rarer, especially in good condition, which mine isn't, but they do occasionally pop up on eBay, so keep your eyes peeled if you want one. Keeping with the braking theme, I found these Avid SD Ultimate arms that I completely forgot I had. In the world of V-brakes, these were considered, well, the ultimate ones, and cost close to the price of a disc brake when they were released. I'm amazed I even have the spring hardware. Most V-brakes have these fasten slit arms, but the Ultimates had them separate, making them pretty easy to lose. The main selling factor was that they used sealed cartridge bearings instead of bushings and had zero play. They were CNC'd and very stiff. You could also swap the side the cable came from, allowing you to get the perfect cable routing, which was pretty neat. Now I actually found these brakes in a box with a load of spilt oil, which probably is a good thing for the bearings. Now the bearings are meant to be replaceable, but I actually once wrote off a pair trying to remove the old ones, so I'm not sure how possible it is. I was probably doing it wrong now. But if you ride trials with these, you might want to swap the bearings fairly often. As praised as these brakes are, I'm going to give possibly an unpopular opinion. I didn't like them, and I think cheaper brakes are actually better. Firstly, you don't need cartridge bearings for something with such little rotation. Hubs, bottom brackets, yeah, but V-brake arms, not so much. The main issue I found was that the bearings didn't cope very well with the side loads trials braking puts on them. As soon as one bearing became damaged or dirty or whatever, it was impossible to get both arms to move at the same time. The freer arm would always move and contact the rim first, and only then would the other arm move. This felt really annoying at the lever and took slightly longer to lock the wheel up. As cool as the Ultimate V-Brake is, I do think just a cheap Shimano one works just as well or better. The other thing I didn't like was how fat the arms are. Trying to cram a V-Brake onto a frame with a super wide rim wasn't ideal, so having fatter arms made it even harder. But that brings me on to the next items, TNN V-Brake pads. These trial-specific pads, which were modified versions of the Magura HS33 pads, hence the weird shape, had one of the conical washers machined into the backing, which helped bring back some space taken up by the V-Brake arm. I actually thought this was my own brake pad material, but it turns out to be TNN's ADM compound, although they were also in the oily box, so completely ruined now. I'll definitely reuse these backings because they're actually really awesome, but I'll make my own brake pad material to fit them. This might look like a normal Hope hub, but take a closer look at that Freehub. That's an Industry 9 Freehub in a Hope body. Back before I had any connection to Industry 9 or Chris King, I had a Hope Pro 4. Now the Hope was a decent hub, but I always wished it had more engagement points. Now there was a spare i9 hub, and rather than debuild my wheel, I wondered if you could just Frankenstein the two together. Amazingly, they both use the same axle size and seemingly the same ratchet measurements too. The i9 Freehub has more poles than Hope, and they engage more often, giving way more engagement points. All seemed good at first, but once I got outside I had issues. Either the ratchet diameter was too big, teeth too large, or poles the wrong shape, but as soon as any power was applied, it would just skip. But no damage done, it was a fun experiment. The Freehub has now been returned to its proper home. This is one of the newest items I'm showing you, but the design is pretty retro. I bought this mini seat last year to fit to my Hex when I entered the British Trials Champs. It saves a bunch of weight and made my bike look pretty old school. It started off live as a kids racing BMX seat. I wanted it to fit lower in my frame like we used to have, which meant I had to get rid of the foam, the post, and cut away a lot of the plastic. I even had to shave down the remaining post to fit my frame, which was a tricky job with only a Stanley knife. But it's now super low profile and lightweight, just like we used to run. Here you can see the size compared to a normal seat. It's probably a 500 gram weight saving too once a seat post is added. Definitely not as comfy though. And you also get a lot of funny looks and comments when using it, so I'm saving it just for competitions. So this might look like a pretty normal boring 22 tooth chainring. In fact, on first look there's nothing special at all. It's cheaply made from sheet steel, no shifting ramps, narrow wide teeth profiles, so why is it in this video? Well, let's put it next to a normal 22 tooth chainring. Spotted the difference? Okay, so this might not be exciting for some, but I love this stuff. It's actually a 20 tooth chainring. 20! So I'm aware some of you may have never used a triple chainring, but the smallest one was nearly always a 22 tooth. Sometimes bigger, but never smaller, certainly not with 4-bolt cranks anyway. 22 tooth became the standard size for trials riding, for street anyway, with an 18 tooth on the rear. I wanted to fine tune my ratio and saw this on eBay, so I thought I'd give it a try. Turns out it wouldn't work without some pretty serious modifications to the crank and chainring bolts. Because of the smaller diameter, it sits so close to the tabs and bolt heads that the chain makes considerable contact with them, which is extremely noticeable when pedaling. I could have filed down the crank tabs and bolt heads, but again, trying to fix one problem brought up many more, so I canned the idea. Still, I've never seen a 20 tooth chainring before, certainly not for 4-bolt cranks, so it deserves to be included. And here's another item I bought trying to fix an issue, but making too many more to be worthwhile. The fix I was trying to do was get a 1-finger blade with extra length to increase comfort and power to my brake. Only issue is, this fresh product blade was made for an older Hope brake than I was running at the time. I thought I could retrofit it to the newer style, but sadly I couldn't. The effort needed to make this fit wasn't worth the reward, so it sat in my toolbox for the last 10 years. I've included it because some people have never heard of or seen a fresh product's lever blade. They did an HS33 version as well too, and those who did know or maybe even had one will like the nostalgia. Either way, it's rare enough to be interesting. Okay, so not a bike part, but the potential to be a bike part. As you've probably guessed from this and previous videos, I like to experiment and make stuff. This is some titanium sheet that I made my tensioner and a crude brake booster from. The 1.2mm worked best for the tensioner. You can get sheets in various sizes and thicknesses from eBay for quite cheap, but be warned, this stuff is hard to work with and do a pretty good job of blunting your tools. Speaking of tensioners, my homemade tensioner might seem like a totally original idea, but it's not really. I took inspiration from a model from a now ceased brand called 74 Kings. These were available in the mid-2000s and used a leaf spring and slider design similar to mine. Now I'm bending the rules again, as this isn't really mine, but this heatsink tensioner was near my box and it's an interesting item, so I'm showing it. It uses a very similar concept to the 74 Kings design. It's still fastened to the bike by clamping it between the frame and hub, and it still uses a steel leaf spring, but instead of a slider, they've added a jockey wheel. It's a pretty cool solution for frames with snapped mech hangers, and is generally pretty hard to hit and snap. Mine is simpler because it's designed to only fit an inspired frame, but this one has pimp carbon, and I do like a bit of carbon. Interestingly, I'm pretty sure the spring is a bit of hacksaw, which is pretty funny, but does mean getting a replacement is pretty easy from most hardware stores. But yeah, I figured not many people have seen a tensioner like this. It's unique and worth sharing.
So there you go, everyone. I hope you found that interesting. Now, one idea I've got, it's kind of copying Seth a little bit from Seth's Bike Hacks, that I think I've got enough parts in this box and just general lying about downstairs that I could build up a whole new bike from this. So I've got a frame on the way, which has a lot of meaning to me, but I'm going to try and build it up and see how good a bike I can build from all my spare parts. Probably won't use some of these kind of unique parts, but I might use some of these things. And actually, I'm genuinely excited to see how that turns out, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I'd love it if you hit me up on Instagram, link down there, and show me what weird, retro, wonderful parts you might have in your spares parts box. And similarly, if you want to see more stuff like this, hit the subscribe button, post a comment down below, thumbs up. I love all that interaction. If you want to see longer videos released as soon as they're made rather than waiting for a schedule, then hit me up on Patreon. If you want some cool merch like the hat I'm wearing, then hit up my webpage, aliclarkson.com. And if you want to help the channel but don't want to commit to any obligations, then I have a PayPal link down below for donations. But yeah, I'm gonna call it there, guys. So I hope you have an absolutely amazing week. Hope you're able to get out and about, or at least get some exercise wherever you are. And I'll catch you next time. So take care, everyone. See you later.